When you die, we'll turn your ashes into cat litter." He laughed, like he'd just told the cleverest joke in the room. My son, my only son, Jared, leaning back in his faux leather chair, gym shorts on, protein shake in hand, scrolling through his phone like I wasn't even real. Like I was just the old thing in the corner of the room, too soft to bite, too worn to throw out. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't hear him, but because I'd learned. Silence cuts cleaner than protest when you've been humiliated by someone you gave your life to. You let them sit in the quiet after their joke. Let them realize there's nothing coming back, that there's nothing left to say. I went back to folding his laundry. His wife didn't laugh either. She just looked up from her laptop, blinked once, and kept typing. Her silence wasn't mine. Hers was disinterest, detachment. Mine was something else. Something older, sharper, heavier. Jared's voice came again from the kitchen, loud over the blender. "You gonna need anything from the store, Ma? Cat litter, maybe?" Then he howled at himself, slapping the counter like he'd killed it. I didn't answer that either. I just stood there, the basket still in my hands, looking at the bright white socks he liked to wear to the gym. All his things were still so clean, his life so composed. Mine, meanwhile, was disappearing into the background of his. He hadn't always been like this. No, there was once a time when he'd cry if I left the room too long, wrap his arms around my knees and beg for one more bedtime story. That boy is gone, replaced by a man with too much confidence and not enough memory. Later that evening, when they left for their dinner plans, fancy steakhouse, some work thing, I sat on their guest bed, the one I'd slept in for the past 3 months since my hip surgery. They'd insisted I move in to recover. But now I see it wasn't for me. It was for convenience. Someone to walk the dog, clean the kitchen, fold the socks. Jared's voice echoed again in my memory, sharp and careless. Cat litter. I used to think I was being sensitive, that my age had made me too soft for the modern way people speak. But it wasn't that. It wasn't my age or my nerves or my so-called generation. It was that I was being disrespected, deliberately, and I had let it go on too long. I stood, knees stiff, bones humming their usual warning, but I moved, slowly, purposefully, to his cupboard in the corner of the kitchen. Jared was religious about his supplements. Whey protein, creatine, collagen, all stacked like medals. And just beside them, an empty jar labeled for next batch. I took it down. I walked outside, barefoot, into the little patch of yard he always complained was too small to bother with. I bent, slowly, and scooped a handful of gritty, dry sand from the flower bed where nothing grew. 1, 2, 3 handfuls into the jar. I screwed the lid tight and placed it carefully back on the shelf. When they came back that night, drunk and glowing, Jared didn't even notice I was still awake. He kissed his wife loudly in the hallway, dropped his keys on the counter, and staggered into the kitchen for a midnight snack. I heard the blender again, heard him gulp, and I listened. I didn't do it to hurt him. Not really. I did it because I needed to remind him, I'm still here. I'm not dead. Not ashes. Not a punchline. I'm a woman who raised him, who buried her husband too young, who built a small business from scratch and paid for his college when he couldn't get the loans. I'm not a shadow in his hallway. I'm the reason he has a hallway. He coughed. Once. Twice. Then spat into the sink and swore. "What the hell's in this?" his wife asked from the living room. "You okay?" "I think the powder went bad," he muttered. I sat in the dark, in the guest room, folded hands in my lap, eyes open, fully awake. He didn't apologize. Of course he didn't. He wouldn't connect the dots, not yet. But he would, and when he did, he'd know one thing for certain. Ashes or not, his mother was not to be treated like dirt. He used to draw me pictures, crude little sketches of our house, of me holding his hand in the middle of a stick figure field, always with too many suns in the sky. Jared must have made 100 of them by the time he was 7. He'd run in from school, bursting with energy, and shove a crumpled paper into my hands like it was gold. "It's you, Mama," he'd say, proud as anything. "I made you smile like that." And I always smiled. Even if I was tired, even if I'd worked an 11-hour shift at the bakery, even if the dishes were still soaking in cold, greasy water and my back ached like a scream. I smiled. I kept those drawings for years, in a box marked Jared's Things in the hall closet. When we moved out of our first house after Frank died, I almost left them behind by accident. I remembered at the last second, in the middle of a rainstorm, and ran back inside to get them. Got soaked doing it. Worth it. That little boy? He used to cry if he thought I was sad. He'd wrap his small arms around my neck and whisper, "You're not allowed to be lonely, Mama. I'm here." And back then, he meant it. He meant every word. It's strange how people change. Stranger still how that change is never sudden. It's slow, like paint peeling, like a faucet that starts dripping just once a day until one morning your sink's full and you can't remember when it started. The first time I felt the shift, Jared was 17. He had just started going out with his friends more. I was proud of him. He was a good boy, stayed out of trouble. But one night I heard him on the phone, whispering, laughing. I know, right? My mom's so old school, like a walking Hallmark card. I froze, not at the words, at the tone, the way he said, "my mom," like I was something embarrassing, something to be explained away. I didn't ask him about it. I told myself not to make a fuss. But that night, I threw away all the old sympathy cards people had sent after Frank's death. I remember thinking, maybe I really was stuck in the past. Maybe I was making too much of it. The next few years were full of little things like that. Shrugs instead of hugs. "Yeah, okay," instead of "thanks, Ma." Birthdays with gift cards and no handwritten notes. Dinners where he barely looked up from his phone. He was still polite, mostly. Still called me Ma, but it became distant. Empty. And every now and then, he'd drop a comment that landed like a stone in the gut. "You don't have to keep baking stuff, Ma. Nobody eats that much sugar anymore. You're still using that phone? You know they stopped making those in, 2012, right? You should really think about moving. It's kind of depressing, living alone at your age." Always said with a smile. Always, just joking. But it chipped away at me. And the worst part? I let it. I laughed along. I thought, this is just how grown kids talk. I didn't want to be one of those mothers who clung too tight, who couldn't let go. So I let go. Too much. By the time he was 30, Jared had a wife, a condo, a job in marketing, and an opinion about everything, including me. "She needs structure," I heard him tell Allie once, not knowing I was within earshot. "She's too used to being needed. You take that away and she just sort of drifts." Drifts. I was the one who held down 3 jobs when Frank got sick. I was the one who taught Jared how to drive, how to pay bills, how to cook scrambled eggs without burning the pan. I helped him apply for scholarships. Co-signed his first lease, lent him $12,000 when his startup failed, and never asked for it back. But sure, I was drifting. There's a kind of humiliation that's quiet, that doesn't involve shouting or doors slamming. It's slow, accumulative, invisible to everyone except the one living it. That's the kind I know best. When he asked me to move in after my hip surgery, I said yes because I didn't want to be a burden. Isn't that ironic? I didn't want to be a burden, so I became their unpaid housekeeper. Every day I folded his shirts just the way he liked, washed the protein shaker even when it made me gag, walked their yappy little dog twice a day, even though my knee clicks so loud it scares birds. And still, he joked about turning me into cat litter. But that's done now. I stood in the doorway of the guest room that night and looked at the quiet hallway. His protein shaker sat in the dish rack, clean and innocent. He never even thought to ask why it had tasted off. He just poured another one the next morning. I watched him drink it too, and I didn't flinch. Not because I'm cruel, but because I'm awake now. It didn't start with cruelty. That's the lie we tell ourselves when we're not ready to admit we've been discarded. It started with favors. Ma, could you walk the dog while we're at work? Ma, we forgot to defrost the chicken. Could you just make something simple tonight? Ma, Allie's parents are coming next week. Do you think you could touch up the baseboards in the hallway, just so it doesn't look like a cave? At first, I said yes to everything, not because I had to, because I wanted to, because I told myself this is family. This is what mothers do. I don't know the exact moment that generosity turned into expectation, but it happened. Suddenly, I wasn't being asked. I was being told. You'll have to pick up Jasper from the groomer at noon. Don't forget, it's on your calendar. The stain on the couch is still there. Could you try that vinegar trick again? We're out of almond milk. Could you make a list for Instacart? And every time I followed through, they got quieter, less grateful, less human. My kindness became a service, a given. Once I left the house to get my prescription filled, a 20-minute walk to the pharmacy. When I came back, Jared was in the kitchen, checking his watch like I'd gone missing. Where were you? I had to pick up my blood pressure meds. Couldn't you have waited? The cleaner's coming and she needed someone to open the door. That was the day I realized. I wasn't a guest. I was the help. I started writing it down. Every request, every errand, every unpaid hour. Not because I planned to show it to them. No, I'm not that petty. But because I needed proof. For myself. Proof that I wasn't imagining it. That it really had become this lopsided. In 3 months, I logged 179 errands, 48 meals, 14 loads of laundry, 9 dog walks a week. And not once, not one time did Jared or Allie say, "Thank you." But that's not what broke me. No. What broke me came on a Sunday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, scrubbing at a pan Jared had burned, making one of his high-protein meals. Allie was on a call, Jared watching football, the dog barking nonstop. And then Jared said it. You know, sometimes I think it would have been better if we'd just gotten a full-time housekeeper instead of moving you in. Would have been less complicated. He didn't even say it to me. He said it about me, loud enough that I could hear it. Like I wasn't even a person in the room, like I was the wallpaper. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he added, "But hey, free is free." The laugh that followed, it wasn't cruel. It was casual, lazy. The kind of laugh a man makes when he doesn't even register what he's done. I didn't say anything. I just finished the dishes, dried my hands, went back to my room and sat down on the edge of the bed. That night, I opened the drawer beside my bed and pulled out the old envelope, the one with the check stubs, Copies of every financial gift I'd ever given Jared. Down payment for his condo, car repairs, tuition gap payments, emergency loan when Allie got laid off, $1,000 here, $3,500 there. A final one for $9,000 when they wanted to renovate the guest bathroom because it smells like old people. All in all, $84,200 over 15 years. Free, he said. Free. The thing about aging is this. People assume you've gone soft, that your hands are too shaky to hold a grudge, that your memory is too spotty to recall every slight, every dismissal, every moment you bit your tongue. They forget you used to be someone, that you still are someone. They forget you remember. So I started thinking, not about revenge. I'm not that kind of woman. But about consequence, about balance, about what dignity looks like after 60 years of giving it away. That night, I made a call. Not to a lawyer, not yet, but to the manager at my bank. A polite man named Jeremy, who always used to address me like I was his favorite aunt. He was surprised to hear from me. "Mrs. Hull, how's the hip? Back on your feet yet?" "Getting there," I said. "What can I help you with today?" "I'd like to discuss some account changes." "Of course. Anything in particular?" I glanced at the dog calendar on the fridge. A big red circle around Pet Spa Day. My name in Allie's handwriting beneath it. A command. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to revoke any and all shared access to my accounts, effective immediately." Jeremy paused, then cleared his throat. "Of course, just to confirm, Jared Hull is currently listed as a secondary signer on your savings and trust accounts. Would you like that authorization revoked?" "Yes." "Understood. And the automatic transfers?" "All of them. Stop every single one." Another pause. "Even the one marked family rent assistance?" "Especially that one." He didn't ask why. That's what I appreciated about Jeremy. "I'll need your signature to finalize everything, but we can start the process today." "Good." That night, when Jared came into the kitchen and asked if I could take Jasper out for his evening walk, I just looked at him and said, "No." He blinked. "No? No." He stared at me like I'd forgotten how to speak English. And then, when he realized I wasn't kidding, he made a face, like he'd tasted something sour, and walked away without another word. I didn't feel guilty. I felt calm. Because the first step to reclaiming your dignity isn't shouting or throwing things. It's saying no, quietly, and meaning it. Frank died in February. There's something particularly cruel about losing someone in winter. The house already feels too quiet, too still. Cold air presses against the windows like a judgment. The radiator hisses, but it doesn't warm the emptiness. It was sudden. A clot, they said. He was only 61. I remember that morning like a scar. Jared was 30 at the time, still renting, still promising to get things moving in his career. Allie had just started her graphic design business. She was working out of cafes and looking perpetually tired. They came to the funeral, of course. Jared in a borrowed black suit that didn't quite fit. Allie in heels too high for the wet cemetery ground. They said all the right things. Hugged too tightly. Cried just enough. Then they left. And I stayed. I stayed in that too big house on Sycamore Street with its brown walls and cracked tile. I stayed because I couldn't afford to leave, and because leaving would mean admitting there was nothing left to stay for. I sold Frank's tools first. He had a whole garage full of them. Jared didn't want any of it. "Ma, what would I do with a bunch of rusted metal?" So I cleaned them, labeled them, sold them one by one to men who told me how rare some of those models were. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted someone to take them who knew what they were holding. Then I sold the car, then the recliner, then the house. Jared helped with none of it. When I finally found a small one-bedroom rental, close enough to a grocery store, small enough to heat, I called him. I signed the lease. "Oh, that's great, Ma. So you're all settled?" No offer to help pack. No mention of the mortgage I'd quietly paid on his behalf for 3 months when they were between clients. Just vague congratulations. And then, because he never wasted a phone call, he added, "Hey, could you spot me $200 for Allie's birthday dinner? We're a little tight." I said yes. Of course I did. Because I still believed that helping him meant I mattered. That was the beginning of a long pattern. Me, in my little apartment with its peeling paint and secondhand furniture, wiring money to my son so he and his wife could vacation in Aruba. Me, spending my afternoons clipping coupons and calculating utility bills, while Jared upgraded to a new espresso machine that connected to his phone. Me, sitting alone on Thanksgiving, while they posted photos from a Friendsgiving they never mentioned to me. Still, I told myself this was love. Just the new kind. The modern kind. Maybe this was what grown children did now. Kept their parents at arm's length, folded them into polite phone calls, Sunday check-ins, and thank you cards with no handwriting. But love doesn't forget you exist when you're not useful. And that's what I'd become to Jared. Useful. He didn't call unless something was due. Didn't visit unless he needed a form signed, a dog watched, a favor cashed in. When I got the diagnosis, mild arthritis, progressing faster than expected, I told him gently, on a quiet Tuesday. He said, "That sucks, Ma. Let me know if you need anything." I didn't ask. Instead, I got used to doing things slowly. One step at a time, one ache at a time, one room a day. And then came the hip. It gave out one morning in the kitchen. I was reaching for a glass, and the floor rushed up at me like a decision I hadn't made. They called it a minor fracture. But there's nothing minor about lying on your own linoleum for 3 hours before someone finds you. That was when Jared stepped in. "We'll bring you here, Ma," he said, like he was doing me a favor. "We've got space. The guest room's barely used." It sounded generous. It even felt generous. Until I moved in. Until I realized that "we'll bring you here" meant we'll bring you into our lives just enough to feel righteous, but not enough to make room. The guest room was a storage room. I had to sleep between boxes of holiday decorations and a treadmill they never used. The hallway lights were always off. The food was whatever I cooked. And every time I hesitated, every time my joints winced or I took a moment too long to answer, they looked at me like a cracked screen, still functioning, but increasingly inconvenient. I started walking with a cane. Jared made jokes about it. "We should get you one of those scooters, Ma. Trick it out with a horn and streamers." Allie laughed. Not at the joke, but the idea of it. They didn't know I heard them later that night. "She needs to find a hobby," Jared muttered. "Or friends her age. This is getting weird." "I mean, we did say it was temporary," Allie replied. And that's when I realized I wasn't healing. I wasn't recovering. I was on borrowed time. And they were counting the days. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying Frank's voice in my head. "Don't let them write you off, Mary Jean. The world will try. You have to speak before they decide you're done talking." Well, I was done being quiet. They invited friends over one Saturday. A small dinner party, they said. Just a few colleagues from Allie's agency and Jared's gym buddy, the one who sold supplements and always smelled like cinnamon and ambition. They cooked something from a New York Times recipe blog, draped a linen table runner over the dining room table, lit candles they usually saved for emergencies. I offered to help. "Oh no, Ma," Allie chirped. "You just relax. You've done enough today." I hadn't done anything that day. No errands, no dishes, no laundry. That was deliberate. I was testing something. They still didn't notice. An hour before the guests arrived, Allie came to the doorway of my room, holding a folded gray cardigan. "Would you mind wearing this tonight?" I blinked. "What's wrong with what I'm wearing?" "It's just, the blue makes you look tired." I looked down at the soft wool sweater she held out to me like a peace offering. Or a disguise. It was hers. I recognized the label. She didn't want me looking like myself. I took it, but I didn't put it on. At 7 sharp, the doorbell rang, and they transformed. Jared's voice got louder, more confident. Allie's laugh came faster, tighter. Their house, normally quiet, irritated, transactional, filled with clinking glasses and overly enthusiastic greetings. I stayed in the kitchen. That had become the unspoken rule. When company came, I stayed out of sight until needed. Sometimes it was a brief introduction. "This is my mom. She's just staying with us while she recovers." Like I was a guest from a forgotten continent. Other times, they didn't mention me at all. Tonight, they didn't. I heard them joke about their cozy place, about how hard it was to find good help these days. Jared told a story about how Allie accidentally ordered $100 worth of artisanal dog food. "But Jasper only eats raw now," he quipped. Laughter. I looked at Jasper, curled on his custom dog bed beside the fridge. He gave a sleepy blink and yawned. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. But the house was small, and it's hard to ignore the sound of your own child rewriting you out of his life. They talked about vacations, investments, a new air fryer. And then the man with the cinnamon cologne asked, "So, your mom's living here full time?" I held my breath. Jared didn't miss a beat. "Well, she needed a place for a while. You know how it is. You get older, things start to break." More laughter. "She's low maintenance, though. We barely notice her." Something sharp and slow moved through my chest, like a needle threading itself into place. Allie added, "We try to make her comfortable, of course, but she's pretty independent. Mostly stays in her room." "Does she still drive?" someone asked. Allie laughed. "God, no. Can you imagine? No offense, but I value my life." I didn't hear Jared correct her. That night, I stayed in the kitchen until the guests were gone. I washed glasses while they lingered at the door, performing their goodbyes. I wiped down countertops while they laughed about how tipsy Allie got. I listened as they clinked last call wine into glasses and toasted to being real adults now. When the house fell quiet, I went to my room, sat down slowly, and looked at my reflection in the mirror. The cardigan lay across my lap, untouched. My blue blouse, my favorite one, with the tiny embroidered flowers at the cuffs, was wrinkled from the evening, but it still fit. Still smelled faintly of lavender. Still mine. They didn't want me there. Not really. They just didn't want to be the kind of people who put their mother in a facility. They wanted the credit without the cost. They wanted me invisible. That night, I took out the envelope again. The one with the stubs, the bank printouts, the thank you notes with no handwriting. I laid them out across the bed in order. Tuition, rent, credit cards, wedding gifts, dog surgeries. At the bottom of the stack, a receipt for a $1,200 espresso machine. A note scribbled on the corner. "We'll pay you back, promise." They never did. The next morning, Jared found me in the kitchen. Hey, Allie thinks she left her ring in the guest bathroom. Did you see it? No. He lingered. You seemed a little distant last night. I was. He tilted his head, used that tone he saved for clients and complaints. Is everything okay? Everything is clear, I said, folding a dish towel. He stared. That's not really an answer. It wasn't meant to be. He exhaled loudly, the way he did when the microwave beeped before he was ready. Look, Ma, if this is about last night, we didn't mean anything by it. It was just jokes. I turned to him, towel in hand. You said I barely exist. No, come on. You said I was low maintenance, that I don't drive, that I'm easy to ignore. He flinched, just a little, but enough. Ma, you want to joke about me? Fine. But understand this. I'm not a prop in your little performance of generosity. I'm not here to make you feel like a good son. He looked at me like I'd just spoken in tongues. Then, quieter. What's going on with you? Nothing, I said. I'm just waking up. It's easy to forget how much you've given someone when you never kept score. I didn't start out tracking every favor, every dollar, every dinner I cooked while my hip healed and they attended wine tastings and networking brunches. I didn't tally the hours I spent waiting in parking lots for their dry cleaning, or the nights I stayed up with Jasper when he whimpered through another stomach bug from that overpriced raw meat diet. But something shifted. And when it did, I opened the drawer. The bottom one, in the old cherry wood dresser I'd brought from my last house. The only piece of furniture I'd kept. Inside was the ledger. Not a real one, just an old college notebook, yellowed at the edges, with flowers drawn on the front. It used to hold Frank's notes about our garden, what vegetables did best in which part of the yard, what fertilizer to avoid, where the chipmunks nested. Now it holds a different kind of harvest. The first page is dated 12 years ago. $3,000. Tuition shortfall. First semester. We'll make it back to you in a year, tops. They never made it back. Next page. $200. Allie's dental surgery. Jared called me crying. Said insurance wouldn't cover it and they couldn't wait. I mailed the check that same day. I remember it clearly. I had to skip groceries that week. 8 canned beans for 3 days straight. But it felt good to help. Felt like love. Another page. $9,500. Down payment, help for the condo. It's an investment, Ma. You'll always have a place to stay when you visit. I've slept on the couch more times than I've slept in that place to stay. Then come the smaller ones. Bits and pieces over the years. $400. Allie's birthday party. $250. New tires. $90. Emergency babysitter, even though they don't have kids. $75. Meal prep subscription. Helps us focus on fitness goals. And then $15. Dog birthday cake. That one I remember the most. Not because of the amount, but because of the look Jared gave me when I hesitated. It's just $15, Ma. Come on, don't be weird. So I paid, and they posted photos online. Jasper in a paper crown, his tongue lolling happily beside a frosted slab that cost more than any cake I've had on my own birthday in a decade. I stopped writing the numbers after a while. Not because they stopped asking, because I stopped being able to look at the page without feeling something I didn't want to feel. Resentment. That's the word I was afraid of. It tastes bitter. It sounds petty. It makes you seem small. But it's the truth. And truth, no matter how late it arrives, deserves to be heard. That morning, after the dinner party and the cardigan and the shame, I sat with the notebook on my lap and added a new line. $0. Self-respect. Finally reclaimed. I don't know what changed. Maybe it was the way Jared laughed about me, Maybe it was how Allie said, "Can you go easy on the onions next time? They make the kitchen smell old." Maybe it was just time. Whatever it was, it unhooked something inside me. Later that day, Jared came home from the gym. He was sweaty, his earbuds still in, and didn't say hello. Just dropped his bag by the door and started rummaging in the fridge. "No almond milk?" he muttered, like it was a crime scene. I was sitting at the table, quiet, watching. "We're out," I said. "Didn't have time." He looked up, annoyed. "You didn't do groceries?" "No." "Why not?" "Not my job." He blinked, like I'd slapped him with a sponge. "Are you feeling okay?" "I'm fine," I said. Just realizing I've been volunteering at a job nobody respects me for. "Jesus, Ma, what's this about?" "Everything," he scoffed. "So you're what, on strike now?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm resigning." I stood up, knees slow but steady, walked past him, left the room. He didn't follow. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I ordered dinner for myself from my favorite old Thai place, extra basil, medium spice. I ate it in the guest room with the door closed and my feet propped up on a pillow. Nobody knocked. Nobody asked if I wanted to share, and I didn't offer. After dinner, I opened the window and let the cool night air in. The sound of crickets, far-off traffic, a barking dog that wasn't mine to calm. I looked at the check stubs one more time. Then I put the notebook back in the drawer and closed it. For good. I hadn't been inside a bank in years. Everything Jared had set up for me was online. He made sure of it. "So you don't get overwhelmed, Ma. Click here, tap there, let me handle it." And I let him. It was easier that way. Less for me to manage, less for him to explain. But that morning, I got dressed. Properly. Not in the usual elastic waist pants and soft house sweater, but in slacks, a button-down blouse, and my low-heeled shoes with the worn-out soles. The ones I hadn't worn since Frank's funeral. I even put on earrings. Small silver studs Frank once gave me for an anniversary. I can't remember the number of anymore. I called a cab. Didn't ask Jared to drive me. Didn't tell him I was going. I simply walked past the pile of laundry on the couch, the trail of Jasper's toys, and left. The woman at the front desk greeted me with a customer service smile. "Good morning. Can I help you?" "I have an appointment with James McNeely," I said. Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Mr. McNeely?" "He handles our high-net-worth clients." "I'm aware." A few minutes later, I was sitting in a temperature-controlled office with plush chairs and a wall of silent screens showing stock indices I didn't care about. James came in, young, confident, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my first car. "Mrs. Hull, it's a pleasure to meet you." "I hope so," I said, crossing my hands in my lap. He smiled tightly. "What can I do for you today?" "I'd like to revoke all automatic transfers associated with my accounts, effective immediately." James paused. "All of them?" "Yes. And I'd like to remove my son, Jared Hull, from any co-signing or beneficiary status across the board, including the joint trust account." He sat back, tapping his pen against the desk. "Of course. I just need to confirm a few things with you before proceeding." We went through the motions, IDs, verification, signatures. My handwriting was slow, but firm. And when it was done, James looked at me with a different kind of expression. Respect. "I'll ensure all changes are processed by end of day." "Are you planning to discuss this with your son?" "No." Another pause. "Would you like to redirect any of the funds or create a new beneficiary profile?" "I'd like to open a trust," I said, "for my granddaughter Emily Hull, age 12. Of course, he said, and slid a fresh form toward me. We can structure it to activate when she turns 21, or earlier with your permission. 21? I said. Old enough to understand the value of what she's been given, and I'd like it protected. Ironclad. No access by her parents, under any circumstances. James didn't blink. It can be arranged. We spent the next hour going over options. He explained things clearly, professionally. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like someone was listening to me, not because they had to, but because they recognized I had something worth saying. When it was all signed, he stood and extended his hand. Anything else I can assist you with? I thought for a moment. Yes, I said. Don't tell my son I was here. He smiled. A real one this time. Understood. I stepped back outside into the afternoon sun, clutching the folder against my chest. My knees ached, my back complained, but my heart felt strangely light. I had done something for myself, something irrevocable. When I got back to the house, Jared was still out. Allie, too. Probably another brunch, another boot camp class, another place I wasn't invited. I boiled water, made tea, took my time. And then I opened his cabinet, the one with the neat rows of plastic tubs labeled bulk whey, vegan blend, recovery stack. I took down the shaker, washed it, dried it. Then I reached for the glass jar I'd quietly placed behind the rice cooker. Days ago. The one filled with fine beige sand scooped from the flower bed outside. Dry, clumpy, indistinguishable in color from his favorite vanilla blend. I spooned it in slowly. Half powder, half sand. No trace of malice. Just even, calculated proportion. He wouldn't taste the difference. Not at first. Just a slight grit. A bit of resistance. A mirror, perhaps, of how I'd tasted my own silence for the past 15 years. Then I put the jar back, sealed and settled. The house was quiet again. I sat in the living room with my tea, waiting, not for him, but for the next breath. For the stillness that comes when you've finally stopped asking to be seen. I didn't want to hurt Jared, but I needed him to feel it. Even if he didn't understand what it was at first. Even if he just coughed and tossed the shake and grumbled about the bad batch. Even if he blamed the brand or the blender or the damn humidity. I didn't care. I wasn't teaching him a lesson. I was writing my own ending, one spoon at a time. Emily always knocks before entering. A small thing. A quiet thing. But I notice. She visits on Sundays, when Jared and Allie are off at their brunches or bike rides or whatever other rituals of wellness they've adopted this season. Emily slips into the guest room, barefoot, her phone in one hand, a book in the other. She doesn't ask for anything, she just sits. Sometimes on the floor, sometimes beside me on the bed. She's 12, going on 30. Already taller than I was at 16. Sharp, observant, careful with her words. You always keep the window open, she said once, curled up in the armchair across from me. I like the breeze, I told her, and I like to hear the world. Makes me feel less forgotten. She didn't laugh. Instead, she nodded like she understood something adults usually don't. Today, she brought me a bracelet she'd made. Tiny beads, all in blue and gray. It's for you, she said. The colors reminded me of that blouse you like. The one Allie thinks makes me look tired? She grinned. That's the one. I slipped it onto my wrist. It was snug, slightly uneven, clearly handmade. More beautiful than anything I'd worn in years. Thank you, I said. She shrugged. You always thank me. Most people don't. That stopped me. Not because it surprised me, but because I hadn't realized how much I'd needed to hear it. After she left that day, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time with the bracelet on my wrist and the trust papers in my hands. I hadn't told her about the money. I wouldn't. Not yet. She's still a child who deserves to be seen as someone whole, not someone obligated, not someone who becomes the next link in the chain of people who take and take without asking what it costs. But I made a promise to myself, sitting there at that table. Emily would never know what it feels like to give and be invisible. She would know love, not dependency. Respect, not expectation. And she would never have to trade silence for a place at the table. The next morning, Jared noticed the bracelet. "What's that?" he asked over breakfast, pouring his usual sludge of almond milk and protein blend into the shaker. "Emily made it for me." "Huh." He looked closer, surprised she had the patience. I looked up. "Why's that?" "I don't know. She's always on her phone. Kids these days. No attention span." I didn't respond. Not because I agreed, but because I remembered the quiet way Emily tied the knot, her fingers steady, her mouth set in concentration. I remembered how she checked the color balance against my blouse, how she undid the thread twice to make it fit better. Jared took a sip of his shake, then grimaced. "Gritty again?" he muttered, shaking the cup. "What is with this batch?" I watched him for a moment. "Maybe it's not the batch," I said softly. He looked at me. "What?" "Maybe it's how you're mixing it." He frowned, then went to rinse the cup in the sink, grumbling under his breath. He still didn't know. Not really, and that was fine. It wasn't about him anymore. Later that day, I called James at the bank, asked if the paperwork had been processed. "Yes, Mrs. Hull," he said. "The trust is active, and the notifications have been disabled as requested. No alerts to the joint family email? None. And her parents can't touch it. Not a cent." "Good," I said. "She'll need it more than they do." He paused, his voice gentler when he spoke again. "She's lucky to have you." "No," I said. "She's just the first one I won't let down." That night, I wrote her a letter, not to give now, but to be opened later. A short letter, written in my neatest cursive, with a single sentence underlined at the bottom. "Never let anyone mistake your kindness for a contract." I placed it in the folder with the trust papers, sealed it in an envelope, wrote her name on the front. Then I tucked it into the drawer beside my bed, right next to the old notebook where I used to keep score. Jared found the grocery list. I hadn't left it out on purpose. It was just there, on the counter, scrawled in my usual shaky handwriting. Things I needed for myself. Not for the household, not for them. Just me. Canned lentils, hand lotion, a jar of apricot jam I hadn't had in years. He held it up like he'd found a lost relic. "You went shopping?" "I did." "You didn't tell me." "I didn't need to." He squinted at the paper. "This is weird. There's 2 jars of jam on here. Who needs 2 jars?" "I do?" He blinked like that answer didn't compute. Then he laughed, short and sharp. "All right. Living wild, huh?" I said nothing. I'd learned by now that silence was more powerful than any retort. That afternoon, I found the dishwasher still full, Jasper's leash tangled in a pile of clean laundry, and Jared's protein powder back in its usual place, as if he hadn't noticed the difference in texture, or hadn't cared. But something was changing. I could feel it. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Jared at the table, arms folded, a look on his face I hadn't seen since he was 12, and trying to explain a broken window to his father. We need to talk, he said. I sat. Slowly. Calmly. I got a call from the vet's office. Payment bounced. Oh? It's on your card, he added quickly, like I might have forgotten. No, I said. It's not. He leaned forward. They said it was declined. That's because I removed my card from the account. A beat of silence. You did what? I removed my card, I repeated. Last week, I canceled all automatic payments, including the ones for Jasper's care. His mouth opened, then closed. I wasn't notified. No, I said. You wouldn't be. His voice sharpened. Why the hell not? Because it's no longer your business. He laughed, dry, uncertain. You're serious. I am. You're mad about something. I'm not mad, I said. I'm done. That threw him. He stood up, began pacing. You can't just... God, Ma, what are you doing? You've been living here for months. You've eaten our food, used our heat, slept under our roof. I stood up too. Paid your rent, covered your groceries, walked your dog, folded your clothes, cleaned your house, and been mocked in it, I said evenly. Yes, I have. He looked like I'd slapped him. I kept my voice steady. You've treated me like background noise, Jared. A ghost who makes your dinner and disappears before the guests arrive. You make jokes at my expense, let your wife speak to me like I'm a burden, and then you ask me for more. He raised his hands. Look, this is getting blown out of... It's not. I took a breath. I opened a trust for Emily. His eyebrows shot up. What? She'll get it when she turns 21. He stepped back, hands dropping. That's great. That's really generous, Ma. But why didn't you... She's the only one in this house who sees me. He flinched again. I could see the words stinging, even if he couldn't admit it. And you just... decided this? I did. He shook his head, laughed bitterly. Without even talking to me? About our future? About the family's needs? I looked at him. You stopped being my family the moment I became your maid. For a long time, he said nothing. Then quieter. So that's it? You're cutting us off? No, I said. I'm cutting myself free. His eyes searched mine. Maybe for softness. Maybe for a weakness he could still lean into. But there was none left. He opened his mouth to speak, then seemed to think better of it. He turned, muttering something I didn't catch, and left the room. The door slammed, not loud, but loud enough. I stood there for a moment, hands trembling, chest tight, not from fear, not from sadness, but from the sudden, overwhelming silence that followed. It was mine now, for once, all mine. I wrote him a letter. Not because I wanted to mail it. Not because I thought he'd read it and finally see me clearly. I wrote it the way you write something in the sand before the tide comes. Just to get it out of you. Just to watch the water carry it away. It began simply. Jared, you were the best thing that ever happened to me. And for a long time, that was enough. The words came slow at first, each one a weight I'd been carrying for years. I told him how I used to wait for his footsteps on the stairs when he was a teenager, just to hear the rhythm of his life still moving through the house. How I kept every drawing, every school certificate, even the broken Mother's Day mug he made in 2nd grade. How I defended him to his teachers when he got lazy, told myself he'd grow out of it. Told myself brilliance looks messy sometimes. I told him about the loans, the ones he never asked for but accepted easily. The sacrifices he didn't see because I didn't let him. How I canceled my own health insurance for 3 months to help with his wedding deposit. I didn't write that to guilt him. I wrote it because he's rewritten me in his mind as someone who never did enough. And I wanted, just once, to remind the paper of the truth. I did everything I knew how to do. And somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing it. I wrote about the little humiliations, the way he spoke over me, the way he rolled his eyes when I mispronounced a new word, the way he left me out of conversations, out of holidays, out of photos, the way he'd laugh when I told stories from the past, like they were relics no one wanted. You didn't need to be cruel, I wrote. You just needed to remember I was still here. I wrote about Allie, too, but gently. I told him I didn't resent her for not loving me. That wasn't required. But I did resent the ease with which she dismissed me, the way she used my presence, then brushed it aside like lint on a sleeve. She doesn't have to call me Mom, but she should have called me human. I paused there for a long time, stared at the paper, let my hand rest. Then I wrote the last line. This isn't about punishment. It's about peace. Mine. I signed it. Just my name. No closing. Then I folded it neatly, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it into the back of the same drawer where Emily's trust letter now rested. They'd stay there together. 2 truths, 2 directions. One handed forward, the other put to rest. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no jolts awake at 3 a.m., thinking I'd left something unsaid. In the morning, I opened the blinds and let the sun hit my face. Made myself a full breakfast. Toast, real butter, eggs the way I like them, not the way Jared prefers. No protein powder, no substitutions, no noise. The silence in the house felt different now. Not hollow, just clean. Later, I heard the front door open. Jared walked in, glanced toward the kitchen, then headed straight to his office. No greeting. I didn't chase him, didn't follow, didn't explain. The letter said everything I needed to say, even if he never read it. Especially if he never read it. I cleaned the shaker bottle slowly. It was always the same routine. His thick, cloudy shake would leave behind a residue like glue. I used a long brush and hot water, scrubbing each curve of plastic until the smell faded. Except this time, I was careful to leave just a hint. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to remind. I opened the glass jar again. The sand had settled. It looked soft now, harmless, like flour that had been sitting too long. I stirred it gently with the spoon, slow, even strokes, until the texture matched the whey powder exactly. I added a little more to the mix, not because I needed to, because I wanted to, because he'd said it again. It was the night before, late. I was pretending to be asleep in the guest room when I heard him through the vent. His voice, low, tired, but sharp, in that way he got when he felt inconvenienced. Allie, she's not getting better. I think we need to talk about the long term. A pause. Then Allie, flat. What do you mean? I mean, this isn't working. She's not contributing. Another pause. She's recovering. It's been months. She's your mother. She's an obligation. Silence. Then, maybe we talk to someone about assisted living. That word, obligation. He used it like I was a water bill, like I hadn't raised him, fed him, fought for him when he was failing his classes, sat through every parent-teacher meeting while Frank worked double shifts, like I hadn't stood in line at 6 a.m. for the limited slots at the public dental clinic so he could get his braces fixed when they snapped, like I hadn't sold my wedding ring for his textbooks. And now I was an obligation. I didn't cry. I didn't get up and confront him. I just waited. And now I measured. 3 scoops of his usual vanilla whey, half a scoop of the sand. Close the jar, shake the bottle, return it to the fridge. Let it sit. In the morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my tea while he stumbled in, groggy, rubbing his eyes with one hand and checking his phone with the other. "Morning," he muttered, already reaching for the shaker. I nodded. He drank it quickly, like always, barely tasting it. Just part of the process, like his stretching, his vitamins, his Instagram updates. Halfway through, he paused, made a face. Ugh, still gritty. I sipped my tea. Maybe the blender needs cleaning. Maybe, he muttered, but he kept drinking. Another cough, another grimace. Nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous. That wasn't the point. I didn't want him sick. I wanted him aware. Aware that something was off, that something didn't feel right in his perfect, processed life, that there was grit where there used to be smoothness, that his days weren't as predictable as he thought. Just a whisper of unease, a reminder that I was still in the room. He poured the last of it down the sink and rinsed the bottle with unnecessary force, muttering under his breath. Then he left for the gym. Didn't say goodbye. I watched the door close. The sound of it used to sting. Now it just meant I could exhale. I took the remaining sand and poured it into a new container, glass, with a locking lid. I labeled it with a strip of masking tape. For when they forget. Not if. When. Because they would. People like Jared and Allie always do. They forget that the hands they dismiss are the same hands that built the floor they're standing on. That silence is not the absence of opinion, it's the withholding of permission. That dignity, once reawakened, is the hardest thing to control. I placed the container in the back of the cabinet, far enough not to be noticed, close enough to reach. Then I sat down at the table again, wrapped my hands around the mug, and waited for the next moment. Not to strike, not to punish, just to witness. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was the grit in their machine. Emily knocked twice, as always. I was at the table, sorting through a few old recipes, cards yellowed with age, corners softened from years of use. She poked her head in, smiled, then stepped inside with that same quiet ease that never felt like intrusion. She never asked if she could sit. She just did. "What you doing?" "Looking for something sweet." She tilted her head. "To eat or to remember?" I looked at her. That girl always asked questions like someone twice her age. "Both," I said. She leaned forward, her elbow on the table. "You used to bake, didn't you? Before your hip?" "I still do," I smiled. Just slower and quieter. She watched me for a moment, then pointed to one of the recipe cards. "That one, the lemon bars. You made those when I was little. You remember that? You let me press the crust into the pan, said I had strong hands for a 5-year-old. I laughed. It startled me, how easy it came. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something folded, a piece of paper, a little wrinkled, carefully smoothed. She placed it in front of me. "I made you a playlist," she said, "for when you're alone." I opened the note. A list of songs. Some I knew, some I didn't. Titles scribbled in her tidy print. I thought music might make the quiet less lonely. I looked up, heart heavy in the best way. "Thank you." She shrugged. "You always notice things." I figured I'd try. Jared never noticed anything. Not when I stopped adding sugar to his coffee. Not when I moved my folded laundry into a suitcase. Not when I began locking the drawer with the trust letter the bank statements, the sand. But Emily did. That evening, after she left, I played the first song on her list through my phone speaker. A soft piano melody. No words. Just sound. It filled the room like warmth, like breath. And I let myself feel what I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not for Jared. Not for some miracle apology that would stitch everything back together. But for her. For the girl who knocked. For the girl who watched me closely and saw the corners others ignored. The next morning, Jared was in the kitchen, complaining about his blender. "It's not mixing right again. Think the blades are dull?" I didn't answer. He turned, shaker in hand. "Ma, you hear me?" "I heard you." "Well, I think maybe the problem isn't the blades." He raised an eyebrow. "Then what?" "Maybe the ingredients have changed." He stared at me for a beat, then laughed, short and unsure. "You're being weird lately." "No," I said. "I'm being precise." He didn't like that. I could see it. He wanted me to be soft again, safe, predictable. He didn't realize those days were over. I watched him drink the shake anyway, out of habit, out of belief that his world was still under control. Then I stood up, washed my teacup, and left the room without a word. That evening, I printed out a single sheet of paper. No letterhead, no drama, just a notice. To Jared and Allie, I'll be moving out on the 1st of next month. Do not make this about hurt feelings. It's about dignity. This is not open for discussion. I placed it on the fridge with the magnet that says family first. Then I went to bed. No tears. No second guessing. The room was quiet. But I wasn't lonely. Because now, when the wind passed through the open window, I didn't hear ghosts. I heard my own breath. Steady. Present. Ready. They didn't say anything the next day. Not a word about the note on the fridge. Not about the move. Not about the word I chose. Dignity. Though I knew it rang in their heads like a bell that couldn't be unrung. Jared avoided me entirely. Allie, on the other hand, hovered. She offered me tea, asked if I needed help sorting my things, made a comment about how brave it was doing this at my age. "I'm not being brave," I told her. "I'm being done." That quieted her for a while. In the evenings, I started packing, slowly, methodically. I wasn't in a rush. It wasn't a getaway. It was a return to something steady, to ownership, to a space where I didn't flinch at every footstep or swallow down every sigh. I found things I had forgotten were mine. The little tin of sewing needles from my mother. The recipe card for Frank's favorite stew in his crooked handwriting. A pair of earrings I thought I'd lost. One of the backs bent, but still there. Still mine. Each item I packed felt like a thread being pulled from the fabric of this house. And the more I packed, the more it began to unravel. They argued louder now. Little things. Groceries. Bills. A stain on the carpet nobody admitted to. I watched it all from the edges. A guest in a performance I no longer cared to applaud. Emily still came. Quiet as always. She noticed the boxes. "You're leaving." I nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't ask me to stay. She just said, "Will I see you again?" I took her hand, held it gently. "You'll see me the moment you need to." She looked confused, but she didn't argue. Before she left, she gave me a folded paper heart. Inside was written, "For when you miss someone who sees you." I slipped it into my purse, close to my wallet, close to the other papers that now held her name. The next morning, Jared finally broke. He found me in the kitchen, taping a box shut. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice tight. "So that's it? You're just walking away?" I looked at him. No, I said. I'm walking toward. Toward what? Some crummy rental where you're alone all day? Where nobody checks in? I tilted my head. Jared, I've been alone in this house every day. I just wasn't allowed to admit it. He flinched. I don't get it, he said, quieter now. Why now? After everything we've done for you. For me? I raised an eyebrow. He opened his mouth, then stopped, closed it, looked away. You don't even care what this makes us look like, he muttered. People will think we kicked you out. Let them. You're leaving us. No, I said. You left me a long time ago. I'm just catching up. He stared at the box on the table, then at the bracelet on my wrist, then back at me. What happened to you? The old me would have folded under that question, would have explained, softened, soothed his guilt for him. But not now. Now I simply said, I remembered I exist. He didn't follow me when I left the room, didn't offer help, didn't make one last plea. That part of him, the one that used to run to the door with drawings, the one that cried when I cried, the one that once said, You're not allowed to be lonely, Mama. That part was long gone, and I wasn't waiting for it anymore. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, no elevator. The stairs creaked, and the paint near the baseboards was peeling. The sink had a slow drip I'd need to ask about. But the windows faced east, and in the morning, the light poured in like something sacred. It was mine. No guest towels folded for display, no dog toys underfoot, no refrigerator notes instructing me when to thaw chicken or when to walk Jasper. Just silence. Clean, real, earned. The movers were efficient. I didn't have much. Some boxes, a few pieces of furniture, my books, the cherrywood dresser. I tipped them more than I should have. One of them, a young man with kind eyes, called me ma'am with a softness I hadn't heard in a long time. Nice place, he said as he carried in the last box. Feels like home. I smiled. It is. That night I made myself dinner. Not for anyone else. Not to earn favor or avoid a complaint. Just for me. A baked potato, a cucumber salad, and 2 slices of rye bread with real butter. I poured a glass of cold milk, ate slowly, felt every bite. Afterward, I sat by the open window and listened. To the hum of traffic, to a dog barking down the block, to a couple arguing softly somewhere above me. Life. Ordinary life. Without obligation. I slept well. Better than I had in years. No creaking hallway. No morning alarms I didn't set. No half-heard conversations about assisted living, just the weight of a blanket and the knowledge that I had chosen this. The next morning, I unpacked a box marked miscellaneous. Inside were little fragments of the life I'd forgotten to honor. Frank's cufflinks, a faded photograph of me holding Jared as a baby, a chipped saucer I used to keep my earrings in, and the envelope, the letter I'd written to Jared. I unfolded it, read it once more. Not with anger, with distance. Then I tore it into 4 neat pieces and placed them in the waste bin. It wasn't needed anymore. He wouldn't understand it. And that was all right. Some things are not meant to be shared. Some things are meant to be survived. Around noon, I called the bank. Confirmed the trust account once again. Emily Hull. Beneficiary. A quiet future set aside for someone who knew how to knock. Who knew how to listen. Who saw me before anyone told her not to. James from the bank said everything was in place. She'll be taken care of, he assured me. I know, I said. I didn't mention the second envelope. The one now sitting in the cherrywood drawer with Emily's name on the front and the words I'd chosen with care. This is not a reward, it's a reminder. That kindness is not weakness. That dignity doesn't have to be earned. That you come from women who remember. I didn't cry when I wrote it. I didn't tremble. I just knew it needed to be said. And I knew she would read it one day and understand. Maybe not all of it, but enough. Enough to walk into a room without lowering her voice. Enough to leave when staying becomes another word for shrinking. Enough to speak, even when silence is expected. That afternoon, I bought myself flowers. A small bouquet of yellow lilies and eucalyptus. Carried them home in a paper wrap. My steps slow but sure. The woman at the corner market smiled and asked, "Special occasion?" I said, "Yes." Jared didn't come to visit. Not the first week, not the second. He sent a text. One line. "Glad you're settled. Let us know if you need anything." I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. Not anymore. It's strange how quiet forgiveness can be. No declarations, no reconciliation. Just the slow release of something you carried too long. I didn't need an apology. I just needed the weight gone. Allie sent an email 2 weeks later. Forwarded a list of articles. Aging gracefully. Elderly nutrition. How to avoid social isolation. The subject line said, "Thought these might help." I closed it without reading. They were trying, in their way. But too late. And not for me, for themselves. For the version of me they could still pretend they hadn't ruined. Emily came on a Thursday. I hadn't told her the address. She found it anyway. I opened the door and there she was. Backpack on one shoulder, shoes scuffed, hair tied up in a loose knot. She looked taller, older, like she'd crossed something invisible in the weeks we'd been apart. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I answered. "I figured it out," she said, stepping inside. Dad left a printout with the leasing company's name on the kitchen table. I searched it and found this place. Hope that's okay. I smiled. It's more than okay. She looked around, her eyes settling on the vase of dried flowers, the neat stack of books by the window, the quiet. "I like it here," she said. "It smells like you." "Like old books and lemon soap?" She grinned. "Yeah." We sat at the table. I poured us both water with lemon slices. She drank slowly, like it was tea. "Are you happier here?" she asked. "Yes." "Even though it's smaller?" "It's mine." She nodded, like that made perfect sense. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a box, a small one wrapped in brown paper. "I made you something." Inside was a clay figurine, simple, unglazed. A little bird curled in on itself, wings folded, eyes closed. It wasn't perfect. The shape was uneven, the tail too thick, but it had weight, intention. "I wanted to make something quiet," she said, "but strong." I ran my thumb along its back. The ridges were soft and warm, like it had just come out of the kiln. "It's beautiful," I whispered. She looked at me, serious now. "I know they don't get it," she said. "Dad and Allie. I know they talk about you like you're something to manage, but I see you." Tears welled in my eyes then. Not from pain, from relief, from being known. I reached into the cherrywood drawer, took out the envelope. "This is for you," I said. She looked at it, then back at me. "What is it?" "A promise." She didn't open it, just held it, careful as if it might break. We didn't say much after that. Just sat. A girl and an old woman. Two people from different ends of a story, but for once, on the same page. She left before sunset. I stood at the window and watched her walk away, the letter tucked under her arm, the world wide and waiting. When she turned the corner, I sat back down, picked up the little bird, placed it on the windowsill. Outside, the wind moved the branches like a whisper. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come home. I was already there,